Welcome, everyone, to meeting number 16 of the House of Commons Standing Committee on Health. Pursuant to the orders of reference of April 11th and April 20th, 2020, the committee is meeting for the purpose of receiving evidence concerning matters related to the government's response to the COVID-19 pandemic. In order to facilitate the work of our interpreters and ensure an orderly meeting, I would like to outline a few rules to follow. Firstly, interpretation in this video conference will work very much like in a regular committee meeting. You have the choice at the bottom of your screen of either floor, English, or French. If you will be speaking in both official languages, please ensure that the interpretation is listed as the language you will speak before you start. For example, if you're going to speak English, please switch to the English feed, then speak. This will allow for better sound quality for interpretation. Before speaking, please wait until I recognize you by name. And this, of course, will vary once we get into questions. But when you're ready to speak, click on the microphone icon to activate your mic. Should members need to request the floor outside of their designated time for questions, they should activate their mic and state that they have a point of order. I remind everyone that all comments by members and witnesses should be addressed through the chair. When speaking, please speak slowly and clearly. And when you're not speaking, please ensure that your microphone is on mute. If you have earbuds with a microphone, please hold the microphone near your mouth when you're speaking. Should any technical challenges arise, please advise the chair or clerk immediately, and the technical team will work to resolve them. Before we get started, can everyone click on the screen in the top right-hand corner, if you're on a PC, in fact, and ensure that they are on gallery view. With this view, you should be able to see all of the participants in a grid-like fashion, and it will ensure that all video participants can see one another. And before we go to the witnesses, I understand Mr. General has a bit of committee business. Mr. General.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chair. First, a brief question to you and through you to the clerk, and then a bit of a statement. If you don't mind, I'll be as brief as I can. The question, first of all, is a motion to summons a witness in order in this committee, Mr. Chair?
Thank you for the question. As this came up before, I had indicated hesitation on that matter and took the matter under advisement. I've since asked the clerk and the law clerk for determination on whether the motion is in order, since there was some discussion on it last time, and I will now ask her to respond to the committee. Madam Clerk, if you would, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So as members are aware, Part N of the order adopted on April 11th states that in addition to receiving evidence, the committees enumerated in paragraph L and M of this order, while meeting by video conference or teleconference, may also consider motions requesting or scheduling specific witnesses, and these motions shall be decided by way of a recorded vote. In addition, the motion agreed to on April 20th further extends this order in Part F3, which includes the following. For greater certainty, the following provisions remain in effect. Paragraphs K to N and P to T of the order adopted on Saturday, April 11th, 2020. So as the order states clearly that this committee may consider motions requesting or scheduling specific witnesses, a motion to summon a witness is therefore admissible, as it is a logical extension of the parameters outlined in Part N of the order adopted on April 11th and in Part F3 of the order adopted on April 20th. However, I would also like to bring the committee's attention to the following passages from House of Commons Procedure and Practice, 3rd edition, I believe page 981. It states that the standing orders place no explicit limitation on this power. In theory, it applies to any person on Canadian soil. And a few lines later, in practice, certain limitations are recognized on the power to order individuals to appear. Because committee powers do not extend outside Canadian territory, a committee cannot summon a person who is in another country. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So as the clerk has just explained, Dr. Alward has again turned down our committee's invitation to appear at this committee. I would just like to point out that Dr. Alward is a Canadian and represents Canada at the WHO. This committee was tasked unanimously with studying the Government of Canada's response to COVID-19. I don't think anyone would argue that the WHO has played a key role in that response. The government has been relying on data from the WHO and has been implementing measures here in Canada based on the WHO's recommendations. That is why it's important that Dr. Alward and the WHO partake in our study on the government's response. So I therefore move that upon the chair being informed of his return to Canada, the Standing Committee on Health summon Dr. Bruce Alward to appear before the committee at a date and time to be determined by the chair. Thank you.
Would like to inform the committee that the World Health Organization has agreed to answer written questions to the best of their abilities, which could provide a possible alternative method of getting the required information. I will now open debate on the motion, and I believe, Mr. General, you've already made your statement. If anyone wishes to enter debate on this motion, please use the raise hand feature. In order to do so, click on the participants at the bottom of the screen. When the list pops up, you'll see next to your name that you can click raise hand. Does anyone wish to speak on this motion? Mr. Davies, I see your hand. Go ahead, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Well, I'd like to speak in support of the motion of Mr. Genereux. I endorse all of the reasons that he indicated, I think so clearly. I would just point out that responding to written questions is helpful, but it's not as helpful as having Dr. Alward appear by video conference to hear and respond to live questions from the committee. I would note for the record that Dr. Alward has done interviews in exactly that format with media outlets. So clearly he has been willing, and the WHO has been willing to make Dr. Alward available to answer questions to the media. So I don't see any principled reason why they would not make Dr. Alward available to this committee to answer similar questions. I would also point out that Canada is a member of the WHO, and I think that the WHO ought to operate with transparency and accountability to its members. As Mr. Genereux pointed out, I think the Minister of Health and this government and Canada's Chief Public Health Officer, Dr. Tam, have repeatedly invoked the World Health Organization as a source of guidance and background information to inform the decisions made in Canada. So if this committee is tasked with assessing the validity, usefulness, and effectiveness of the government's response, then I can't see how not hearing from the WHO wouldn't help us in carrying out that task that's been given to us by Parliament unanimously. So I will conclude by saying I do appreciate that Dr. Alward is in Geneva, I believe, so the summons can't be executed on at the moment. But if we do issue this summons, then if and or when Dr. Alward does return to Canada, the summons will be in place and is in a position to be executed on at that time. And I would endorse this motion accordingly. Thank you, Mr. Speaker, Mr. Chair.
I therefore will call a question. I would ask the clerk to do a recorded vote on this. Clerk, please go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. The vote is on the motion of Mr. Genereux. When I call your name, please unmute and say yay or nay. Mr. Fisher.
Yay.
Mr. Kellaway.
Yay.
Mr. Pulowski.
Yes, yay.
Ms. Sidhu. Ms. Sidhu, I did not hear you. Could you please unmute and repeat? Ms. Sidhu.
Yes.
Thank you. Mr. Van Bynen.
Yes.
Ms. Jansen,
Yay.
Mr. Generu,
Yes.
Mr. Kitchen,
Yay.
Mr. Weber,
Yes.
Monsieur Thériault,
Mr. Thériault?
Oui.
Yay.
Mr. Davies.
Yes.
The result is 11 in favor, 0 against.
Point of order, Madam Clerk. You did not call my name.
Thank you, Ms. Jacek. I do not have you substituted in, so therefore only members of the committee will count their votes.
Thank you.
Thank you. Over to you, Mr. Chair.
So the motion has passed. We will arrange for the summons to be created. I don't recall if there was a date or time specified, but I think it will be a time determined by the chair, and we will get that underway and report back to the House when that happens, or report back to the committee when that occurs. I would now like to welcome our witnesses. So as an individual, we have Dr. Robert Fowler, Professor of Medicine and Program Director of Clinical Epidemiology and Healthcare Research at the Dalla Lana School of Public Health, University of Toronto. We have from the Canadian Society for Molecular Biosciences, Dr. Tarek Morway, and I apologize if I didn't get the name right. I shall try. From Genome Canada, we have Dr. Rob Annan and Dr. Cindy Bell. Dr. Rob Annan is President and CEO. Dr. Bell is Executive Vice President, Corporate Development. And from Vito Intervac, we have Dr. Volker Gertz, Director and Chief Executive Officer, and Dr. Paul Hodgson, Associate Director, Business Development. We will start with Dr. Fowler. Dr. Fowler, you have 10 minutes. Please go ahead with your statement.
Great, thank you very much. I'd like to thank the honourable members and Mr. Davies in particular for the invitation. And as stated, I am a critical care physician. I work at Sunnybrook Hospital in Toronto, where I am just now, and have the opportunity also to engage in graduate studies at the Dalla Lana School of Public Health and chair the Canadian Critical Care Trials Group, a world-leading group of interprofessional academic researchers and patient partners that study the best care for our sickest patients. My own personal and academic interest clinically is around the care of critically ill patients, and so that is, I guess, directly relevant to the COVID pandemic, and have had an opportunity to, I guess, firsthand and also academically examine other healthcare systems in well-resourced settings, and also in my work with the WHO in various non-governmental organizations during SARS and different outbreaks and pandemics over the years, including avian influenza and Middle East respiratory syndrome, and for about a couple of years, Ebola outbreaks in West Africa, and last year in the DRC. And I've helped WHO and the Public Health Agency in most of these outbreaks in one capacity or another through guidelines or clinical care on the ground. In terms of disclosures, I'll just state that I don't have any financial relationships with industry or pharmaceutical companies, and have received peer-reviewed funding from CIHR, and am supporting the Canadian response to WHO's Solidarity Trial that examines and evaluates medications for COVID-19. The context that I'll speak from otherwise, more specific to COVID-19, as we know, it has spread rapidly over the last 4 months to many countries around the world. And the infection rate...
Dr. Fowler, the interpreters are asking if you could speak more closely into your microphone.
Yes, I can try, if that's a little bit better.
Thank you.
Thank you. The infection rate is unknown, but estimated over 3 million people, causing 200,000 deaths, and well over 50,000 cases in Canada, with approximately 3,000 deaths. And despite this most commonly causing mild illness, the temporal concentration of infections amongst susceptible populations has at times overwhelmed seemingly robust healthcare systems and their capacity, specifically too few intensive care beds and ventilators for patients and too little personal protective equipment for healthcare workers. And that's been seen prominently in other jurisdictions. And we have been worried about it in Canada and have prepared for it, but have been just on the precipice of that. The illness itself, and probably people are very familiar with this by now through your own sort of knowledge reading and this being a very common topic in the lay press. This typically presents as a mild illness, respiratory in nature, but can progress to cause severe pneumonia, the need for oxygen administration, mechanical ventilation, and on rare occasions, sometimes beyond that, so needing circulation of the blood outside the body to provide oxygen and carbon dioxide removal, and some assistance for the heart and lungs with dialysis and pump function. And so these patients can get very, very ill, and therefore care in a hospital, in an ICU is of direct relevance to this outbreak, more so than probably others that we've experienced by the numbers of patients that have been infected and have presented to hospitals. In many of the publications to date, the mortality rates among those recorded.
The interpreter signals that the sound is not of good enough quality to ensure interpretation.
Time.
Dr. Fowler?
Mm-hmm.
The interpreters have noted that the sound quality is not good enough for interpretation. If you could try very hard to speak, perhaps a little more loudly and more directly into the mic. Thank you.
Thanks, I'll try, and I appreciate the interruption. We're fortunate that this has only occurred intermittently in Canada. I would say through the Public Health Agency's leadership and social distancing messaging that has so far mitigated the impact for certain elements of the healthcare system to be overwhelmed, although the aged that are living in long-term care homes, and I visited a number in my sort of local area the past week, have not been protected. And this is a big issue, I think, for this outbreak, and something that may invite questions. I would also say on the response to learn more about this outbreak, CIHR has demonstrated some fairly strong leadership and made some tough decisions to support the early research response. One of the things that I did want to bring up is that I think that we have an opportunity to work more collaboratively on the.
The interpreter would like to indicate that the sound is inadequate. Interpretation will resume when possible.
Points.
I'm sorry, Dr. Fowler. Again, we're having a problem with interpretation. The sound is very difficult for them. Interpretation is quite a challenging thing, particularly simultaneous translation. So the better the sound quality, the better off we are. So
let me try again and see if this is any better for the interpreters.
Say a few words and we'll ask the interpreters if that's good. Or actually, if the interpreters are having a problem, still they'll step in and let us know. Please carry on.
Thanks. So on the ground, I think we would benefit from a greater pan-Canadian collaboration, better public health knowledge of existing resources and gaps. For instance, how many ICU beds and ventilators exist in hospitals and regions, and a stronger, better coordinated infrastructure for clinical research and quality improvement to characterize and to learn and to quickly improve care delivery for an otherwise unknown illness. These shortcomings are understandably more, apparent in the context of COVID-19, but they exist in usual times as well. The 13 provincial and territorial healthcare systems have a lot in common, but also differ in ways that should enable more constant cross-learning. And we don't always share insights from those natural experiments in healthcare delivery. At the federal, provincial, and territorial governments, we've not really created, I would say, an adequate pan-Canadian machinery to support a more systematic innovation and evaluation that would create some more nimble systems that promote higher quality care in the context of an outbreak like this. I'm going to speak just a bit about clinical treatments and knowledge gaps that exist. And as of today, there are still no, I would say, proven effective medical treatments against COVID-19. There are a number of pre-existing antiviral medications, anti-inflammatory medications, immune modulating drugs that are under investigation. treatment with plasma from recovered patients anticipating a high concentration of antibodies to COVID-19 are being investigated. Monoclonal antibodies manufactured and directed against specific aspects of the virus are under development. And I think Canadian-led science in this field has been very impressive in the past, particularly so for other viruses such as Ebola. Our best treatment options to date remain best supportive care, oxygen, mechanical ventilation, and organ support as needed. We have knowledge gaps in the ideal ways to do these things, including how to move from oxygen supplementation to nasal prongs to masks to mechanical ventilation, and whether certain forms of our therapies may aerosolize the virus and place healthcare workers at increased risk. And that's been a prominent concern in hospitals for us treating patients and being part of that risk circle, I guess. In addition to medication trials, I would say that we should study the safety and effectiveness of those elements of supportive care. So far, there have been many clinical trials examining frequently a single treatment and typically enrolling too few patients to convincingly determine whether a treatment's effective or not. And they've been concluded oftentimes without necessarily helping the next generation of patients. And clinical treatments and research performed in one jurisdiction with one treatment, they usually are inconclusive. And this is another call for mechanisms for collaborative pan-Canadian and international initiatives that draw upon more durable research infrastructure to examine treatments in parallel with one another and to reach a conclusion on one medication, and not having to stop a single treatment trial before moving on to the next evaluation, which is typical of many of the ways that we fund and undertake trials. One of the early and valid concerns of the pandemic, I think, has been the risk of the sustained situation of overwhelmed hospitals and ICUs with too few ventilators and an excess of preventable deaths. And this has occurred in many developed healthcare systems, including most recently throughout many parts of the US. And we've come very close to this possibility, I think probably really for the first time in our modern history, to explicitly planning on how to deny care to those in need because of lack of commonly available resources. And while social distancing has flattened the curve of infections, the frail and the vulnerable of aged Canadians living in long-term care homes that can't take social distancing have been at continued high risk of contracting illness and dying once COVID has taken hold. And this has been recognized for a long time, and I think it's an important element of this outbreak that is much more prominent, visible to the population, and one that we should not lose sight on as we go through it. Similarly, I would say healthcare workers in long-term care facilities have not been adequately prepared and supported, and this is something that we can do better in the future. I wanted to comment on other jurisdictions and what we might learn from others' examples. And while many highly resourced countries have been pushed beyond their existing capacity by this pandemic, some have shown much greater ability to respond quickly and to learn from the experience. And I wanted to highlight a particular example in the United Kingdom that has a similar burden of infection by population as the US does, but they have done very well with responding with respect to research and a learning healthcare system. And I think we might draw some lessons there. It's underpinned by a couple of decades of political commitment to medical research with a goal of driving value in the system and improving care through innovation, and evaluating that innovation and adopting it when appropriate. The UK, at 1/5 the size of the US and about a 20th the size of China, has been the first to develop and take a vaccine for COVID into clinical trials. And at the clinical front lines, it's leading the world with a longitudinally supported research network in NHS hospitals across lots of specialty areas. And this is something that in my own field of critical care, we've seen for a number of years and are envious in their ability to support longitudinal research in a durable way through funding from their national funder and then to the coalface at NHS hospitals.
Dr. Fowler, could you wrap up, please?
Yeah. I would want to sort of wrap up by making a few key messages. I think that these sorts of outbreaks, and indeed this pandemic, is likely to occur at increasing frequency. And I think we have a deep knowledge base and expertise in both basic science, public health, and clinical medicine to counter transmissible infectious diseases. I think we're still challenged a bit by a lack of a collaborative pan-Canadian sort of at-the-ready clinical research infrastructure. And this results in some delays and inefficiencies in our ability to characterize and learn. And I think that this is something that there are concrete ways that we may improve upon in the future. And thanks very much for your time and attention and any questions that might be relevant.
Thank you, Dr. Fowler. We go now to Genome Canada with, I believe, Dr. Anand or Dr. Bell to present a 10-minute statement, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Je vous remercie de me donner aujourd'hui l'occasion de m'adresser au comité. On behalf of Genome Canada, I am joined today by Dr. Cindy Bell, who's been with Genome Canada since we were founded 20 years ago, who played an important science leadership role during the SARS outbreak in 2003 and is doing so again today. We're very pleased today to join colleagues from the University of Toronto, Canadian Society for Molecular Biosciences, and the Vaccine and Infectious Disease Organization based at the University of Saskatchewan to share insights from Canada's bioscience community and to engage in dialogue with committee members. Je veux rendre hommage aux travailleurs de première ligne dans nos hôpitaux, les épiceries, les pharmacies, les relais routiers, les comptoirs de main à apporter. Je pense en outre aux millions de Canadiens qui, chaque jour, font des sacrifices pour aider à combattre la COVID.
Speaking of the million of Canadians, I think I was on the wrong channel. I apologize.
French, you're on the French channel, and when you're speaking English, you're on the English channel. I think that might help. And of course, everyone else, make sure you're on the channel that you want to listen to. Thank you.
All right.
Please carry on.
Okay. Je pense.
I'm thinking of the million of Canadians who every day make sacrifices to help fight COVID-19. We are all living in extreme uncertainty, but we are showing strength and resiliency.
Our world, in human health and disease, climate change, and food security do not involve inanimate objects, but the living world, living systems, the world of biosciences. And at the heart of these living systems lies DNA, the blueprint of life. That DNA is the basis of the science of genomics. At Genome Canada, we believe genomics, responsibly applied, will change the world for the better. And that is especially true now as Canadians are in the grips of a terrible biological pandemic. Today, I will begin with a brief description of genomics and underscore how it is driving immense advances in biosciences. Then I will provide an overview of how genomics is helping us understand and address the current outbreak. And finally, I will introduce you to CanCoGen, a new national genomics network launched to coordinate and amplify Canada's efforts. Today, Canada is a world leader in genomic research, and the knowledge coming out of genomics is transforming our world for the better. But how did we get here? Genomics is, at its core, the study of DNA, of genes, and how those genes interact with each other and the environment. It's about reading the blueprint of life and using that knowledge to understand how things work, or in the case of infectious disease, don't. Genomics is about data, the generation of molecular data about our health, our disease, our food, our environment, and then using that data to improve our health, support the environment, and improve our standard of living. Genomics really came to prominence during the Human Genome Project, completed in 2003. That international effort took 13 years and about $1 billion to complete, the equivalent of a biological moon landing. Since then, we've gained powerful knowledge, technologies, and tools, including the ability to read and interpret an organism's DNA, its genome. We can now sequence a human genome practically overnight and for a few $1,000s, which we are increasingly doing as genomics begins to find its way into our clinics, our public health labs, our companies, and our research institutes. Genomics is producing massive data sets, which, through the application of AI and other tools, are opening our eyes to new understandings, innovative products, and groundbreaking therapies. Canada has some of the world's best researchers working across many sectors, from health to agriculture, forestry to energy. They're world leaders in data production and analysis, genome sequencing, gene editing, synthetic biology, novel diagnostics, and more. And
Dr. Anand,
Yes.
maybe speak a little slower. I think that it might make it a little easier for the translators.
Happy to do it. Sure. Sorry about that. Why are we able to do this? Because since 2000, the Government of Canada has made forward-looking investments to build Canadian genomics excellence through Genome Canada. A few words about who we are. Genome Canada is a unique, collaborative national model that has leveraged over $1.5 billion in strategic federal support into $3.6 billion worth of research through partnerships with provincial governments, industry, and other partners. Our federated network of 6 regional genome centers, from Genome BC to Genome Atlantic, ensures that Canada's genomics enterprise has national breadth and regional depth. Moreover, our partnerships with industry, especially small and medium-sized enterprises, and other end users in the public and not-for-profit sectors, ensure that genomics research results have real-world applications. For example, we've helped create 82 startups and promoted the growth of 230 other companies. And Canadian genomics patents are second worldwide after only the US. We help bring research to life. Let me move to our role in healthcare and the mandate of this committee. With an aging population and increasing chronic disease rates, the imperative to bring genomic innovations to Canada's healthcare systems is clear. Through Genome Canada investments in human health, genomics research has already led to saving lives and improving health outcomes and disease management for patients touched by cancer, heart disease, autism, epilepsy, and rare diseases. These investments are at the intersection of genomics and healthcare and are leading the shift from a disease-oriented system to one that is...
Dr. Anand, I'm sorry, but if you could slow down a little bit more again. It's really hard for the interpreters to who are doing this. All right, thank you.
These investments at the intersection of genomics and healthcare are leading the shift from a disease-oriented system to one that is more precise, personalized, predictive, and preventative. Genome Canada has been laying the foundation for its implementation in clinics across Canada through All for One, Canada's Precision Health Partnership. This strong health genomics foundation has been the engine driving our rapid response to COVID-19 today. In mid-December, scientists identified and sequenced the genome of SARS-CoV-2, the virus that causes COVID-19, in just 10 days. Scientists around the world, including Canadians, have since been working around the clock to understand what that genome tells us, how it interacts with people, and who may be most at risk. And they've started to use the viral genome and the mutations it accumulates like a series of fingerprints. So we're able to track the virus's spread and transmission patterns within communities and around the world. Genomics can also help us understand why some people get so sick while others do not, and identify risks of disease severity and potential health outcomes. This is where CanCoGen comes in. Announced by the Prime Minister on April 23rd, CanCoGen is part of a new national medical and research strategy to combat COVID-19. It is a grassroots effort led by Genome Canada, but driven by Canadian scientists, public health labs, and genomics institutions to use genomics to unlock understanding and help shape effective policy. With the $40 million in federal support announced last week, the network will scale up sequencing of up to 10,000 patient and 150,000 viral genomes from individuals who have tested positive for the virus in order to generate large-scale data sets. CanCoGen's members include the National Microbiology Lab and provincial public health labs, major genome sequencing centers through CGen, hospitals, universities, the private sector, and the 6 regional genome centers. The network will be a coordinated and decentralized model working with standard protocols for sample collection, data sharing, and data analysis across provinces. Results will be shared with public health leaders and deposited into global databases. CanCoGen will connect with national genomics initiatives around the world in the UK, the US, and elsewhere. It will also align with Canada's national medical and research strategy on COVID-19, including the new Canada Immunity Task Force and National Serology Study. The data we collect today will help shape and inform public health policies, including test and trace plans, and will be available to researchers for years to come, enabling studies for future novel viruses to quickly determine how they spread and how to stop them. We are building a sustainable national genomics infrastructure to combat both the current pandemic and the next one. Beyond the immediate health crisis, we need to think about Canada's future recovery. We know that Canada is not in this fight alone. Countries everywhere have implemented unprecedented health control measures, and how and when we will fully recover economically, socially, psychologically is still unknown. Genomics will make crucial contributions to Canada's economic and social recovery across all regions of the country, and key sectors like agriculture, national resource management, advanced manufacturing, and public health. It's clear there will be an imperative to develop industrial strategy with an eye to ensuring greater national self-sufficiency, and having made in Canada solutions based on genomics and biosciences will be essential. This experience has shown us that while we can't predict precisely where science will be needed, it is certain that scientific capacity is essential in a crisis like this, an important lesson we must remember as we emerge from this crisis. I'll be happy to discuss these further in the question and answer period.
Thank you, Dr. Anand.
Okay.
We go now to the Canadian Society for Molecular Biosciences, Dr. Tariq Moroy. Please go ahead, sir, at 10 minutes.
Thank you very much. Good afternoon, everyone. I would like to thank you on behalf of the members of the Canadian Society for Molecular Bioscience for inviting me to speak before this committee. Many of our members have been at the forefront of the response to COVID-19, and we welcome the opportunity to speak to our experience. Bon après-midi, merci beaucoup de m'avoir.
Good afternoon. Thank you very much for the invitation. Today, to speak on the Canadian response to the outbreak of COVID-19, our members have been at the forefront of the response and welcome the opportunity to speak to our experience.
Biologist and a biochemist by training. I'm also a professor at Université de Montréal and an adjunct professor at McGill University. I have a lab with graduate students, postdocs, and so on. I work on the biology of blood cells and leukemia and lymphoma. I also was president of my own institution and scientific director of over a decade, so I have experience of science administration. I'm also president of this society, Canadian Society of Molecular Bioscience. And again, I'm honored to be here on behalf of our members. The society was founded in 1957 and regroups researchers, professors, mostly from university and research centers, from biochemistry, cell biology, molecular biology, and genetics. So we are the group that does the investigator-driven research in the labs all over the country. This laboratory work is mostly basic research or fundamental research and generates the knowledge that fuels the innovation and trains the next generation of scientists. We have a mission, a four-part mission. We want to promote biomolecular science. We would like to, and we foster our younger colleagues, the trainees, the graduate students, and the early career researchers. We organize scientific meetings with international visibility and give younger scientists the opportunity to speak and to make their science known. We support the implementation of EDI principles, equity, diversity, and inclusion in academic institutions. And we have a strong willingness to do advocacy for science and research towards the federal government. Of course, we support a strong scientific and health research community, and we would like to ensure that Canada remains a world leader in innovation and scientific discoveries. Now, most of what we know about viruses, how the virus enters the cells, docks onto the cells, goes into the cells, replicates, all the enzymes and proteins that play into the mechanisms, comes from basic research and fundamental research over many, many years. I have made a PhD thesis on hepatitis B virus.
Excuse me, Dr. Moray, interpretation is having a problem again.
Too fast.
A little bit too fast. And you do not have a headset? Did we sort that out earlier?
No,
okay.
I have tested. The sound was good when we tested it.
Okay. Well, just try and speak very clearly and a little bit more slowly, if you will. Thank you so much.
So my point was, well, most of what we know about the biology of viruses, and SARS-CoV-2 is just one example, comes from the knowledge, basic science, and the knowledge on biology of cells and how viruses interact. So this is important. This has become important for all Canadians in this times of pandemic. And the basic science and fundamental research brings the basis to make innovative treatments and cure diseases that affect millions of Canadians. Without the investments...
Dr. Moray, I think we have a problem. We're going to suspend the meeting and we'll sort out this interpretation problem. So we'll just suspend for a few minutes to see if we can sort this out. Thank you.
Okay. Okay, you want me to continue now?
Yes, please carry on.
Okay, thank you very much. So this is Grace of my daughter, Claudia, who has all the equipment needed. So I was saying that most of what we know about viruses come from basic and fundamental research, how this virus enters the cell, how they replicate, and what are the effects, the immune effects, even the immune response. Now, with fundamental and basic research, we have all the tools in hand for treatment and for innovative new drugs, and we can confront the issues that we face today and our children will face in the future. And we feel strongly that without the investments that have been made by the governments, both provincial and federal, to support the scientific community, Canada would have fared far worse in the face of this pandemic. We would like also to acknowledge the strong and coordinated response of the Canadian government and granting agencies to combat COVID-19. We appreciate the fact that this response has been led by science and scientific insight, provided by the best and brightest scientists from across the country. We also appreciate that the communication we feel is of high quality according to the difficult circumstances and is based on the possible availability of scientific data. This is also a consequence of the long identified science as a priority for health and security of Canadians. And we will uphold this in the days that come during the pandemic. We also appreciate the ongoing communications from the governments. I can speak to the Quebec government and also to federal government. This includes Canada's Chief Public Health Officer, which have all been guided by science. We acknowledge this is a difficult task, and adjustments have been made since situations change sometimes from day to day. Many of our members have engaged in promising research and have been at the forefront of efforts to address this pandemic. I can give an example from my own institution. We were able within weeks to set up a testing lab with our RNA biology experts and with the PCR machines that are in the institute and the level 2 containment facility we had. So we're now helping the local hospitals to do clinical trials. We also will set up an antibody lab, and we will soon have a level 3 containment lab that we already had but had to be recertified by Santé Canada to do real antiviral research with live human viruses. So the fact that we were able to react quickly to that is due to the government-financed infrastructure, personnel, and equipment with fundamental science in biochemistry, genetics, and so on. So this, I would like to underline this. Without this, we would not have been able to react so quickly. Now, the positive aspect, if there's anything positive to say about COVID-19, is that to see how quickly researchers in universities have come together to collaborate and to respond to the offer that the CHR new funding line has provided. And I can give many examples, colleagues from McGill University collaborating with people from Alberta and people from Université Laval with other across the country. So it brings the scientists together like nothing before, and it's really nice to see. On the other hand, whereas many in the scientific community were preparing for the CHR spring competition, we have noticed that CHR has canceled this spring competition when we were ready to even evaluate the already submitted grants. I was on a panel and I was noted that, of course, the spring competition was canceled. We, as a society, our members and my colleagues are very worried that this will do damage to early career researchers because they have put in their first grant application. Now they're worried about how to finance their research. It's to be noted that Canada is the only country to have a major national funding agency cancel its competitions for funding health research. We worry that this is at the expense of other health research that then will still be necessary after the pandemic is over. There is cancer research, there is cardiovascular diabetes, and many other problems that need attention. And we appreciate the quick response of the CHR, but we would like to underline that we need to maintain the support for health research at the same level or even higher after COVID-19 pandemic is over. And as I said, the excellent infrastructure that we have in Canada and the funding has enabled us to respond quickly. This is very paradigmatic. Even before the pandemic, there were warning signs that Canada's commitment to its researchers was starting to slip behind other countries. And I just want to give a few numbers here. Canada is only spending 1.5% of its GDP on research and development, whereas the OECD average is around 2.4%. We as a society have pointed that out in meetings with members of parliament and other persons on the Hill early this year. We are no longer in the top 20 countries and lagging behind such as countries the Czech Republic and Slovenia in terms of total research intensity. So our first recommendations, and I would like to give three recommendations to the Canadian government or to this committee, is that the government enact policies and programs to get our funding on health and research up to OECD average of 2.4% of GDP. We also recognize that in budget 2018, the Canadian government has made significant investments in research following the recommendations of a report that the government itself has established, a panel that has established the Fundamental Science Review. And this was very welcomed. However, it has only, for fundamental research, and this is one number I would like to cite here, only put into place 60% of what was recommended by the panel and the Fundamental Science Review, 708 million over 4 years in budget 2018, and the Fundamental Science Review panel recommended 1.2 billion over 4 years. So our second recommendation would be to follow the guidelines of this panel, the Naylor report or the Naylor panel, the Fundamental Science Review, and to install these $500 million over the next 4 years to maintain health research at a high competitive level to keep Canada ready for health challenges that certainly may come. Finally, our third recommendation is that we believe it is essential to collect data on a wide range of demographics. We have already seen that the pandemic plays out differently in different areas of Canada. We need to ensure that we collect information and data on how different demographics across the country are experiencing the pandemic differently, both to inform our response, but also on global health crisis to come, on other global health crises to come. The data should be collected through a multidisciplinary approach, enlisting our social scientists, bioethicists, and more to ensure that we gather the breadth of our research required to properly analyze how Canadians were affected by the pandemic and how we were effective in our response. Thank you very much for this invitation again. I'll be happy to answer your questions and look forward to them. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Dr. Moray. We go now to Vito Intervac with Dr. Gertz or Dr. Hodgson. Please go ahead, 10 minutes.
Yes, good afternoon. Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you very much to the committee for giving us the opportunity to address the committee this afternoon. My name is Volker Gertz. I'm the CEO and Director of Vito Intervac, and I'm joined by Dr. Paul Hodgson, who is our Director for Business Development. Both of us have been with the organization for more than 20 years, and personally, I'm still a researcher. I still run a lab, and I'm also a professor here in Saskatoon at the University of Saskatchewan at the local vet college. So this afternoon, we were asked or invited to talk to you about the efforts that are ongoing here in Saskatoon at the University of Saskatchewan. And so I thought I would start that I just quickly give you an introduction about Vito Intervac, which stands for the Vaccine and Infectious Disease Organization, the International Vaccine Center, a very long name. It's one of Canada's largest research organizations focused on infectious disease research and vaccine development. We are really, truly a national facility. We are collaborating with researchers all across the country. And our Intervac facility, our high containment lab, and I'll speak about that in a second, is really designed to facilitate research in Canada, to bring in collaborators from all across the country to use our facilities and make advantage of the unique infrastructure that we have here. Vito Intervac is a global leader in infectious disease research. We have more than 45 years of experience working in both in the animal and as well as the human health sector. We have developed 10 vaccines over the years. 6 of those were world's first, and so that really speaks to the type of research that's going on here. And we have quite a bit of experience working with coronaviruses as we develop both vaccines in animals, as well as currently also working on MERS, another coronavirus. And just to give you an example, for example, just a few years, Canada was facing a coronavirus very similar to what we're seeing now in pigs. And there we responded to it as quickly as we did now, made a vaccine in 18 months, and the vaccine is being licensed now to commercial producers for pigs. So our research here at Vito Intervac is really addressing the threat of emerging diseases. And we're one of the few labs in Canada right now that is equipped and has the infrastructure available to work on these emerging diseases. And these include both human emerging diseases like the Zika virus or the new COVID-19 or MERS or other, as well as animal health threats. And so African swine fever, for example, a very important disease that is currently threatening the Canadian pork industry, is also being researched here at Vito Intervac. To speak directly about our activities on the COVID-19, we started our work immediately when the World Health Organization recognized in January 9th, I think it was, recognized that there is a new virus in China, a potential new problem. The same afternoon, we started to internally decide, or we decided that we would start working on a vaccine for it. As soon as the sequence for the virus became available, we designed our vaccine and immediately started to work on it. I also reached out to Dr. Matt Gilmore, who is the Director General of the National Microbiology Lab in Winnipeg, and said, Matt, is there anything that we need to do here together? Is there anything that Vito can help you with? And I'm proud to say that in collaboration with our colleagues in Sunnybrook and in Winnipeg, Vito Intervac was the first lab in the country to isolate the virus from a patient sample. We were the first lab in Canada to have an animal model developed, and we're using ferrets for this. And now we have a second model in hamsters, and we're even working on a third model in cats now. And we're currently the first lab in Canada who now have our own vaccine that we started to develop right in January, already in animal testing. And so we call this the proof of concept stage. We already have animals vaccinated with our vaccine. And next week, these animals will be challenged with the virus, and we will actually see whether the vaccine works or not. And all of that work is happening in our Intervac facility, which stands for the International Vaccine Center. It's one of Canada's and the world's largest high containment facilities. And this is really speaking to the foresight that the government had several years ago, building a facility like that allows us to address emerging diseases when they arise. We can house in there hundreds, if not thousands, of animals right now for our COVID-19 research. And we can also host researchers from all around the world to perform this research. For example, Dr. Kelvin and her group, Alison Kelvin from Dalhousie right now, is currently running a ferret trial here at Vito Intervac. And so there's a lot of interaction and research going on in collaboration with others right now. In fact, we have now more than 100 requests from partners all around the world, including big organizations like the Gates Foundation, large industry, as well as academic collaborators, to now use these animal models to look at antivirals, to look at drugs, and to test even other vaccines. So we have, in response to this, ramped up our capacity here, and essentially our whole organization is now focused on the COVID-19 research. We're using all the infrastructure that we have available right now to run as many studies as we can in parallel. That, of course, was recognized by the government, and we received generous support to do some of this work. And I just like to acknowledge, you all may have seen the Prime Minister speaking directly about the $23 million for Vito to accelerate our vaccine development. That money will help us directly to take our vaccine into clinical trials. So the vaccine, as we speak, is currently manufactured already, the prototype of it. Over the summer, we're now doing some the necessary safety testing, which is very, very important that we don't take any shortcuts there. And then we're looking forward to start our clinical trials in the fall. There was also an announcement of $12 million for our manufacturing facility. And so this is something that we have been working on for a few years now, establishing a manufacturing facility right here in Vito Intervac in Saskatoon, allowing us to essentially take prototype vaccines as we have right now into clinical development and make this more or fast track it and make it more effective. And so this is something that with the $12 million we will be now able to do. We're establishing a GMP manufacturing facility right here in Saskatoon, and that will enable us to not only develop or manufacture prototype vaccines for clinical testing, but will also allow us then to, in the long term, manufacture vaccines like the COVID-19 vaccine. There was also funding from CFI to operate our Intervac facility, and we generously acknowledge that was great support for us. It helps us to operate the facility and also helps us to now ramp up our research capacity on this work. And very important also is to mention that the province of Saskatchewan, through Innovation Saskatchewan, came in and also provided over $4.2 million to help us in our COVID-19 research. So where are we right now? We're doing a lot of studies currently addressing antivirals, and we heard earlier about it. There is a lot of promising candidates that other producers and other manufacturers have in the world. There's also some new compounds that are holding a great promise. We're testing them in our animal models here, and we're offering that service to everybody around the world, including the World Health Organization. We're participating in 3 expert groups with the World Health Organization. We were part of the expert meeting in Geneva that was organized in February. And again, a lot of our contract requests comes in from international partners that are looking for or asking us to help us with their antiviral and therapeutics. Our own vaccine, as I mentioned, so the safety testing will continue over the summer, and then we will be able to do the clinical testing as early in the fall. And one of the highest priority, and that's why I'm saying this again, is for us to make sure that this vaccine will be available to Canadians. So it's a Canadian effort. It's we have partners in Canada involved in Montreal. We have collaborators from all across. The clinical testing will be done in Dalhousie. So this is truly a Canadian effort, and the goal is to make sure that the vaccine or this vaccine will be available to Canadians all across the country. So we were also asked to quickly address what are vaccines and what are the differences in these different vaccines. And so the technology that we're using is called a subunit vaccine. And so that is really only a piece of a virus that we're using there. We're using one of the structures, one of the proteins a virus had. Other candidates or other vaccines that are currently being developed globally include using the whole virus as what we call an inactivated virus. We're just using the viral genome, which in this case will be RNA, but we can also have DNA vaccines for it. And lastly, you may have heard about those vectored vaccines. So there we're using another virus, a viral vector, to deliver just a gene, just a part of the genome of the virus and deliver that as a vaccine vector. And the last thing I wanted to mention is our efforts in helping our local communities. So 2 weeks ago, we reached an agreement with the Saskatchewan Health Authority here, and we're using our facility to sterilize and decontaminate N95 masks and other protective equipment. We had this approved by Health Canada. These masks are now being collected in the hospitals and are being shipped here to Vito Intervac, where we now essentially decontaminate them using a process which is called vaporous hydrogen peroxide, VHP, that we use here routinely for our processes. And we can now decontaminate thousands of masks every week and ship them back to the hospitals to be reused. So really, the take-home message or the summary of my talk, Vito Intervac, we're proud to be part of the national emergency response. We're proud to be part of Canada's response to this COVID-19 outbreak. As an organization, we are very uniquely positioned to rapidly respond to these emerging diseases. We very much acknowledge and are thankful to the support from both the federal as well as the provincial government And while this is now it's helping us a lot in our efforts, and there is a lot of money available now, I think the message really is that we will continue to see these emerging disease outbreaks in the future. And so it's very, very important for a country like ours to provide long-term support to organizations like ours that are uniquely positioned to quickly address these challenges when they come. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you, Dr. Gertz. We'll go now to our questions. As normal, we will go through 3 rounds of questions. We will start our first round of questions with Mr. General. Mr. General, please go ahead. You have 6 minutes.
Oh, I take the full 10, Mr. Chair. And also just, I was following along the progress of your puzzle on the last background that you had, Mr. Chair, but I can't do that with this new background that you have. So you'll have to keep us updated verbally on the progress. Thank you everybody, all the witnesses for taking the time today, but also thank you for what you're doing on the ground in the fight against COVID-19. I think that's certainly important to recognize. I do want to start with my questions with the Canadian Society of Molecular Bioscience, if I may. Mr. Maroy, the funding of from the Naylor report, it seems to be stuck at this 60% underfunded or funded level for a while now. Any indications that we're going to see some additional funding to get that Naylor report fully funded?
Yeah, I think you made the right point. We have been. You're hearing me? Okay. Yeah. So we have spoken to a number of your colleagues on the Hill in February and made this point. I hope it will be back on the agenda of the budget 2021. Certainly not this year, this is already gone. Because it's important, otherwise we will lose our competitiveness with other countries that we have built over the years. In particular, CHR open operating grants or NSERC Tri-Council open operating grants that fund basic research. I think it's very necessary. What I have heard from the persons I spoke together with my colleagues from CSMB board is that 2021 may be a good year when this could be back on the agenda. But this was at a time when COVID-19 was not yet on everyone's agenda in the early February days. So I hope 2021 will be, the budget 2021 will recognize the value of basic science for reacting to pandemics like this, the value for training the people, because a grant that comes in the lab pays PhD students, technicians, postdocs, and trains them in this way. And they will end up in all kinds of biomedicine and biotechnology professions, and they will maybe even go to Saskatchewan, develop vaccines with Volker Gertz, probably. So this is very valuable, and I don't stop to underline this. The Naylor report was commissioned by the government, and it's a very high-level panel, and their recommendations were very, very well thought through. And we just advocate without stop to really implement these recommendations.
Great, thank you. I recall when Minister Ambrose commissioned the study back in the previous Parliament before me. So you'd agree with me then that the underfunding of $700 million has had a significant effect on the development of antivirals and a vaccine? Yes.
Well, I would not make a direct line to underfunding of the 500 million. This is 500 million is the sum that has not come up to the 1.2. To make a direct line to not having a vaccine today will be difficult to make. What effect that it had? Some labs had to be closed. Some junior researchers didn't get the money that they were hoping or trained for, and the investments to put into these junior researchers by many institutions, universities, were in vain. This is the impact that it had, the underfunding, and it will have.
Right. So if I can, sorry, I just have a couple. Yeah, sorry, I just have a couple of minutes left. I think obviously with basic research and fundamental research, we don't know what we don't know in terms of what it will come up with. So in terms of if it could have had the significant impact on antivirals in a vaccine, I guess we don't know that. I do want to quickly move over to Dr. Fowler, if I may, and just get your comments. We've heard a lot about the splitting of ventilators, doing it in hospitals in New York. Get your experience on the ground if splitting of ventilators would significantly help on the ground today.
Yeah, thanks very much. A very specific question around caring for very critically ill patients. It's something that has had a bit of attention in the media. I'll say sort of briefly and to the point that it's probably a bit of a risky practice, and it's not one that healthcare professionals, respiratory therapists, physicians, nurses, etc., would generally endorse as a very good strategy. The specifics we could get into, but it's not a safe practice to undertake as a plan A through F, I would say.
Yeah, it's interesting. We've heard either testimony or just through a number of other individuals about the how it's either working or not working in other countries, and for to hear your caution on the ground, I think is probably fair and something that this committee should certainly consider. Mr. Chair, my time is up, so I'll cede back my 5 seconds. Thanks.
I've got you have 30 seconds.
You just want to hear my voice for 30 seconds longer? It's fine. I'll give you back.
It's soothing.
30. Yeah.
Thank you. So we're going now to Mr. Fisher. Mr. Fisher, you have 6 minutes, please.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. And as usual, thank you so much to all our witnesses. And it blows me away the amount of expertise that we have in this room. I want to ask, and Dr. Volker, you spend an awful lot of time on speaking about the work that your organization is doing, and I want to thank you for that. It's incredible, and it gives us hope. But the question I'm going to ask is what I think most Canadians and most of us in the room are wondering: exactly how close are we to a coronavirus vaccine? So I would start, because we heard a lot from Dr. Volker, I'd start, if I could, with Genome Canada, and then maybe go to Dr. Maroy, and then we'll go back to Vito Intervac if we could to finish off. So how close are we to a coronavirus vaccine? Who will vaccines be tested on, and how will that be determined? Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you for the question. To be totally honest, I am going to defer to the experts at Vito Intervac. The work we're doing will no doubt and hopefully support their very important and very good work, but we at Genome Canada are not in the vaccine development business in anywhere like the way they are. So I'll defer to them.
If I may, I think it's very difficult to make to give you a number of months or years. I give you 2 examples. HIV is there for 35 years. We have excellent antivirals molecules, but no vaccine. The virus is more complicated, and there will be a vaccine maybe sometime, but it's difficult. Hepatitis B had a very early vaccine by attenuated viruses, then recombinant vaccine, which is now used since decades. Somewhere in between these both will it be. Now, the issue is, and Volker Goertz will answer as the most competent here, I guess, testing, right? So you need controlled cohorts that during the course of an infection will be tested, and then that takes time. Even the antivirals, I think the clinical trials can be faster than the clinical trials for the vaccine. But you have hepatitis B, HIV, we're somewhere in the middle, and predictions are very hard to make.
Yeah, I just want to echo that. I think it's very hard to exactly predict right now when this vaccine will be available. I mean, you can imagine we have people here working essentially around the clock, trying to get this done as quickly as possible. I think what we might see, though, and this is where I want to alert the committee to, is that we may see that some of these vaccine candidates, our own or also others from around the globe, might get approval under what is called an emergency authorization. So that would allow that essentially after completion of a phase 2 trial in humans, it may get approval by the regulators to already use it in individuals that are facing a higher risk of being infected, for example. So if under that scenario, I could see that under an emergency authorization, the first vaccines may become available within the next 12 months.
All right, thank you very much. Well, I will say it's amazing that Canadian know-how is playing such a huge part in the role of coming up with a vaccine for coronavirus. Over to Genome Canada for a quick second. You, Dr. Anand, you spoke about the $40 million investment in the genomics network. What is the role that genomics plays in finding a treatment or a vaccine for this virus?
Okay, thank you very much for that follow-up question. So the $40 million, broadly speaking, that is going to go to CanCoGen is split into two pieces. There's a viral sequencing element and a human sequencing element. On the viral sequencing element, it's really designed to do, in effect, kind of two major things. One is to use the mutations that accumulate in the virus as it's being transmitted to be able to, in effect, track its spread. So it becomes a very useful tool as we start to reduce some of our social distancing to monitor how it's spreading. But it also allows us, by looking at regions that are more mutated and less mutated, allows us to perhaps hone in on some candidates for these vaccines. And so that genomic information can be useful to the people who are actually doing the vaccine development. On the human side, there's the other 20 million is really to look at the genetic variations between patients and how that informs their reactions. Because what that might do is, identify specific genes that are, for instance, more common in say low symptom patients. That could help point, for instance, at potential therapeutics, drug interventions, and so on that aren't necessarily vaccine, but rather small molecule interventions. There's a couple different strategies at play there.
Okay, so I guess I'll guide this last question, to anyone who feels that they might have insight in this. So we know that Canadian companies are working very, very hard to come up with a vaccine, and we know that countries all around the world are doing the same thing. Is there a sharing? Is there a complete sharing, or is there any feel of protectionism amongst these groups, these businesses that are coming forward with perhaps future vaccines for coronavirus, or are they sharing all of this information with every country that's working on something like this?
So maybe I can take that question. So as part of these expert group meetings that the World Health Organization is organizing weekly, we're part of that. Many of the vaccine manufacturers are actually presenting their data. They're sharing publicly their data. And there is the willingness to share the information and the results with each other. We have also now seen in the news, and details are just starting to come out, that some of the larger manufacturers, including AstraZeneca, for example, who may have access to certain technologies, are considering approaches to make them globally available to other countries, and maybe under a license allow manufacturing in specific countries. That is something that is currently being looked at, currently about or in the process of maturing. So I can't really speak to details, but I think we're seeing that there is a global approach to this.
Thank you, Mr. Fisher. So Mr. Fisher's time is up. Is there anyone else who wishes to give a quick answer? Seeing none, we go now to Mr. Theriault. Mr. Theriault, please go ahead. You have 6 minutes.
Thank you very much. I'd like to thank all the witnesses for their important contribution. Could he bring his microphone down in front of his mouth, please?
Could you bring your mic down in front of your mouth, please? Mr. Theriault, your mic is not deployed. There you go.
D'accord. Yes, okay, fine. So I'll start again. Mr. Chair. There was a sound issue. So my question is for Dr. Fowler, who was a part of the clinical research group, Solidarity Research Group, And Mr. Volker earlier on spoke about the WHO that has established an expert panel and that it wants us to collaborate and bring together our knowledge. You talked earlier on that about the fact that you didn't have a conflict of interest with any research or grants for research, but there are some people who are worried that intellectual property rights might prevent the development of a vaccine and are proposing other ways of going about it. I understood from the answer provided earlier on that this is under discussion, but how should one deal with this question of intellectual property in terms of developing a vaccine? And will this have an impact on the access to a vaccine? Could it be slowed down because of the issues relating to traditional manufacturing processes? And is it realistic? I seem to have understood from the answer provided very quickly by Dr. Volker that yes, we might think that there might be a collaboration between public fundamental research and private fundamental research. So I'd like to hear what you all have to say.
Very much. I mean, I can take the first stab at this, but I think it's a shared response likely. I have been helping the WHO with the Solidarity trial, and it's a trial that focuses on looking at medications for the treatment of patients with COVID-19 and isn't likely to engage vaccine testing. That's possible, but that's not part of the current layout of the trial. It's very much sort of focused on treatments for patients right now that are hospitalized and sick with COVID. So I'll stop there and maybe turn it over if you wish to others working on the vaccine.
So I think from my perspective, while intellectual property is important, and it's certainly important for the commercial manufacturers, making sure that their technologies are protected, and these expert groups with the WHO are confidential in nature. I would also say that in a situation like this, intellectual property cannot stand in the way of developing a vaccine for people that are dying on the street. And I think that is being globally recognized by everybody who is in the business and involved and currently trying to, as quickly as possible, make a vaccine available. And so even speaking for our own organization, it is certainly something that needs to be addressed, but we're not actually addressing at the moment. At the moment, we're really focused on the science and getting a vaccine done as quickly as possible.
And perhaps I'll add a perspective from Genome Canada. We're not on the vaccine development side, but we are. The network we're leading is going to be developing and generating an immense amount of data around both the virus and a number of the patients, and all of that data. Everybody who's involved, and that's from public health labs all the way through to individual researchers, are signing on to commitments to make that data publicly available, deposit that both into national efforts, but also international databases that then can support worldwide effort. So it's really very much about open science in terms of the data.
Donc, je comprends.
So if I understand from your answers that you do not foresee any slowing down because of the issues of marketing a vaccine. You don't think that there will be delays or in relation to marketing, and that everybody is going to give out a helping hand to each other to ensure that the vaccine is available as quickly as possible. How much time do I have left? Can I ask another short question?
15 seconds.
Oui.
Okay. Well, in that case, perhaps one can answer this question in a different way. There's no vaccine that is available for HIV or hepatitis C or other types of coronaviruses. On the one hand, because we stopped research at the end of those epidemics, but what makes you think that a vaccine for COVID-19 will be possible and available? And do you believe that in a context where we don't know whether there's immunity for having had the disease itself, and if there is no immunity because one has already had the disease, how could that influence the possibility or not of developing an effective vaccine? Very quickly, somebody could answer that, please.
Correct. There's a lot of questions that at the moment we simply don't know the answer to. There is a lot of scientific questions that need to be addressed, whether you are susceptible to reinfection or not, where pre-exposure makes you less responsive to vaccination or not, how long vaccine immunity will last, and so on. So there is a lot of questions that need to be addressed. I think overall, though, comparing this coronavirus to HIV, for example, I think the chances of getting a vaccine for this ones are better than it is for HIV.
Oh, thank you, Mr. Theriault. We go now to Mr. Davies. Mr. Davies, please go ahead. 6 minutes.
Well, thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you to all the witnesses for sharing your expertise and time with us today. Dr. Fowler, if I may begin with you, in an April 16 article from CBC News, you were quoted as saying, "There is substantial risk people will see the numbers leveling off and will receive the message that this is time to breathe a sigh of relief. If we hadn't instituted public health measures, there is not necessarily a lot to separate us from other parts of the world." In your view, is now an appropriate moment in the outbreak for provinces and territories to contemplate easing public health measures?
Thanks very much for the question. I think it probably is a reasonable place to start to plan for easing of the public health measures, but I think the principle of a lot of caution going into easing them is very important. And I think we have a situation where people are not used to this kind of a public health measure. The weather is getting better. People are naturally looking to get out and congregate a bit more. And I think that we are still in a very risky period. Even though the numbers have leveled off, it doesn't take sort of very long to find a place where we're having outbreaks. And the most obvious example is in our long-term care homes. And so I think it's reasonable to start, but we have to start, I would say, very cautiously, very slowly, and to be reactive to what we find. It's not as though there's a lot of history to draw upon here, but I think that the population is likely to do it anyway. And I think that it's probably good to try to take a very measured approach and to react to what we see.
Thank you. Dr. Gertz, the World Health Organization recently published a brief stating that there, quote, currently no evidence that people who have recovered from COVID-19 and have antibodies are protected from a second infection. And the WHO subsequently clarified that it expects that most people who are infected with COVID-19 will develop an antibody response that will provide some level of protection. When do you believe we will have some clarity with respect to whether or not COVID-19 infection confers immunity and gives us an indication of the depth of that immunity?
Yeah, so that's unfortunately still going to take a little while. So I can tell you that some of the animal studies are underway to look at reinfection. So you infect some animals and then you wait for a little while, let them develop immunity, and then you reinfect them. Those studies are underway. And in humans, this is something that is now part of the Solidarity study and others that is going to address those. But that's going to take a little while before we will have those results.
Thank you. Dr. Annan, in an April 24th, 2020 op-ed in the Hill Times, you wrote the following: "Scientists have started to use the viral genome and the mutations it accumulates like a series of fingerprints, tracking the virus's spread and transmission patterns within communities and around the world. Genomics tracks these changes so we may also determine if new, potentially more severe strains are emerging," end quote. Have any new, potentially more severe strains of SARS-CoV-2 been identified to date?
Not to my knowledge, no. But of course, one of the themes here, of course, is that there's lots of people who don't know. But no, at this point here, my understanding is
Dr. Nan, could you speak more carefully into your microphone?
Absolutely. Right. So at this point here, I'm not aware of any what we would call, say, more severe strains caused by mutations. But if one were to emerge, we'd want to catch it pretty fast.
Are you aware of how many strains of SARS-CoV-2 have been identified globally at all?
Well, it gets into a little bit of a definitional problem, I guess, and what you call a strain. I mean, there are thousands of variants now that you can distinguish based on these mutations. So I don't know whether they've been classified into distinct strains, but I would defer to my colleagues who may be a little bit more familiar with the viral sort of phylogenies.
Thanks. Dr. Gertz, I know that Vito Intervac has received at least $23 million in public funding from the federal government to develop an COVID-19 vaccine. Were there any conditions attached to that funding you received from the Canadian government that would require you to make that vaccine available to Canadians or to implement a specific funding structure?
Those negotiations are still underway. Like I don't actually know if there's anything at the moment in the contract, but as I stated publicly, we're making it a higher priority for us to ensure that our vaccine is available to Canadians. And maybe I'll let Paul Hodgson, our Director for Business Development, jump in, as he's the one who's really spearleading that specific contract.
Sure. Well, if before Dr. Hodgson answers, I'll just throw in a second question for him to consider. Who will own the vaccine in the end if you are successful in developing one?
Those are two easy questions, aren't they? So I think one of the key things is, as Volker said, our goal is to bring this forward for Canadians. There is nothing in the current funding agreement that would stipulate that, but we had received Bill and Melinda Gates funding years ago, and part of our overall strategy in the organization now is global access and ensuring that things are made available. At this point, we own the we could say intellectual property of this moving it forward, but it will be a fundamental aspect of us, as per most of our grants, to ensure that Canada has a first rights, I guess, or ability to receive the vaccine.
Okay, if I can throw one last question in.
Don, I'm sorry, Mr. Davies, your time's up.
I guess I can't. Thanks. I'll wait for the next round. Thanks.
Thank you. So thank you, Mr. Davies. That ends round one. We'll go now to round two. We'll start with Dr. Kitchen. Dr. Kitchen, you have 5 minutes, please.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair, and thank you everybody for being here today. It's greatly appreciated you taking the time to be here and present to us. I've got a bunch of questions around the table, but I'm going to start with home field advantage and give it to a place where I still have very fond memories when I did my residency at Royal University Hospital. So I do appreciate you being here. And Dr. Gertz, I'm taking it that the funding that was being announced you haven't got at this point in time. Is that correct?
I believe that's correct.
Okay, thank you. I was very interested to hear you talk about the PPEs, in particular, what you've done on the sterilization of N95 masks and the decontaminations of them. And we've asked many times of the government on how many masks are we having being made by Canadians. Can you tell me how many masks every week or every day you would be able to desterilize?
Probably thousands per week. So I think the estimate is between 6,000 and 7,000 if we use some of our rooms that are currently being used for our research. So this is where we might be getting a little bit in trouble. If we were to use the whole facility just for this purpose, we could certainly decontaminate tens of thousands of weeks, but we would limit the space that we can use for our research. So it has to be a good compromise, and working with the health authority in Saskatchewan, between 6,000 and 7,000 is a number that we had come up with.
And that's fantastic. We actually have a number, and that's great to hear. Thank you for that. You talked a little bit about antivirals, and I'm interested to know, and from what I'm hearing is that, and not only from you, the researchers here today, but also others, that because of all the emphasis has gone to COVID-19, it's taken away from all the other viruses that are out, all the other research that's out there. And a lot of research, the biosciences, et cetera, are being left behind while everything is focused on COVID-19. But I'm interested can you comment to me whether you have any idea of how many antivirals we actually need?
How many specifically we need? I think we need to find a few that really work. At the moment, I think the most promising candidates are showing partial efficacy. They're somewhat helpful in this, but we haven't, as of yet, we haven't really found a molecule that completely clear infection. So the use right now is really limited in getting people quicker or sooner out of the hospital, but it's not really controlling infection at the moment.
Where would those antivirals be stored once they were developed?
So again, they would be developed by commercial partners who have facilities to manufacture them. They follow the same regulations as vaccine manufacturing. They have to be produced in very, very specific facilities, in GMP facilities that are specifically designed for this, and then would be stored, I'm assuming, with these manufacturers.
Okay, thank you. Now, still on that same subject, and I'm assuming because the Public Health Agency of Canada was developed back after SARS, and as it came about, a lot of the talk was about antivirals being stored. And I'm wondering, are you working with the PHAC on developing antivirals?
So we have lots of collaborations, in fact, with the Public Health Agency. That includes also testing of compounds that might act as an antiviral, yes.
Okay, great. Thank you very much. I appreciate that. Dr. Fowler, and I appreciate you being here, and I thank you for everything that you're doing. You talked a little bit about clinical signs, and I'm wondering if you could comment just briefly, because there's a lot more clinical signs that we're hearing about. Besides the basic respiratory ones, we're now starting to hear issues, for example, of clotting, of small strokes, et cetera, being developed, of children that might present with discolorations of their toes, et cetera. Can you comment on that for us, please?
Yeah, I think as we learn more about this, we're appreciating the spectrum of presentations that are not maybe the most common, but ones that show up after you see many more patients. Predominantly, it's going to be starting out with febrile illness, respiratory nature, cough, that often, you generally feel very unwell systemically. Respiratory is still the most common presentation to hospital, but we are seeing, as you've mentioned, possibly an increased rate of both venous and arterial clots happening. I think it's not entirely clear that this is different from baseline severe illness, but there is the suspicion that it seems to be. And in children,
and would a lot of these clots be in the lungs?
Dr. Kitchen, I think your time is up. We'll go now to Dr. Jaczek. Dr. Jaczek, please go ahead. 5 minutes.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you also to all the witnesses. And I'm certainly very pleased to know that the funding that the government has announced will be put to excellent use through all the ways that you've described to us. My first question is for Dr. Fowler. Dr. Fowler, you did talk about collaboration, pan-Canadian collaboration, and the need for improvement. And I was wondering if you could maybe make some suggestions whether there should be some specific mechanisms or structures that need to be strengthened in some way. This seems to be a bit of a theme that we've heard from other witnesses through the course of this committee's deliberations. So could you elaborate on what you might see as ways to improve that pan-Canadian collaboration?
Sure. So I'll give you two ways. One that maybe speaks a little bit more to public health and acute care interface. One of the questions at the beginning of the outbreak concerned about capacity for care in ICUs was we didn't really know how many ventilators, how many ICU beds there were. We had done a study to try to do this sort of brute force accounting by going hospital to hospital a few years ago, and did come up with probably our best estimates. But there's no obvious mechanism for hospitals to talk to regions, to talk to provinces, to talk to the Public Health Agency in order to have this on a contemporary basis. So a mechanism to allow that to feed up at a national level would be helpful. The second thing I might say is that, well, I think there's been really very good investment from CIHR into this response. One of the points I wanted to make was that we often fund projects as isolated projects, clinical projects that then have a shelf life. They tackle one question and then they're done. And there's not a lot of infrastructure on the ground that is just ready to go in the clinical research environment. And so there aren't, for instance, research coordinators, nurses, et cetera, that sort of exist longitudinally. And so the startup time is a little bit longer, and it's hard to get that going in all parts of the country. And so we find ourselves trying to play catch up.
Thank you. My second question, again for you, Dr. Fowler, relates to the Solidarity trial. Could you describe which particular drugs are being tried, antivirals, hydroxychloroquine, or what they might be? And you made reference to the fact that there have been some trials done, not very large numbers, discontinued too soon. So how is the Solidarity trial going to be different? Maybe you could elaborate what types of numbers you're looking at for each of the medications that will be tried. Will it be randomized, the assignment of the particular medication to the patient? Will there be placebo? In other words, no treatment? Could you just give us a description of how that is all going to work?
Thanks very much. So this trial is one that's happening in over 100 countries around the world, and Canada was one of the early folks to sign on to this. In fact, we helped design a lot of it, I would say. It's a randomized trial, so patients are assessed for eligibility, and they either get one of the treatment arms or standard of care. The current treatment arms in Canada include one medication called Kaletra or lopinavir ritonavir, typically used for HIV, and very successfully so. It was evaluated in a relatively small trial in China without the ability to be confident in an effect, and therefore needs to be tested in a large number of people. There are a number of trials happening that will have larger numbers, and this is one of those, and the numbers of randomized patients are in the many thousands as opposed to many hundreds.
Thank you very much. Do I have time left?
1 minute.
Yes. So my final question, Dr. Anand, you've described Genome Canada's work in terms of looking at viral mutations, also looking at human genetics to see if there's particular tendencies to be susceptible to various viral mutations, etc. Have you done similar work to this? You're obviously doing this for COVID-19. Have you done similar work for other viruses? And has it led to some sort of clinical outcome that was successful?
Thank you very much for the question, Dr. Jaksic. Perhaps I'll ask my colleague, Dr. Bell, to answer that. She has extensive experience with the clinical research and clinical application of work.
Dr. Anand, microphone, please.
Sorry, I was saying I was passing it to Dr. Bell, who is better positioned than I am to answer the question.
Yes, we really have not done any significant research on virals before. We've done some work in the past with VIDO in early years, developing vaccines, et cetera, but nothing that would compare to what is needed in this particular case.
Thank you, Dr. Jaksic. We go now to Mr. Weber. Mr. Weber, please go ahead. 5 minutes, please.
All right. Thank you, Mr. Chair. I assume you can hear me. My first line of questioning, I guess it will go toward Vito Intervac and Dr. Paul Hodgson. Dr. Hodgson, well, Dr. Gertz talked about this in his presentation. He talks about the development of the 10 vaccines that your organization has developed so far, one being for pigs. It took 18 months to get that vaccine, but it is currently out there and I guess being used. So I did want to talk a little bit more about that, about the mechanics of who owns the rights to these vaccines and who will have access. And I know that this has been asked earlier by a few others, but I just want some further clarification here. So if a company like yours develops a vaccine, of course, is this a license then to print money, or are there regulations about how this can be charged and how it can be distributed? Are there Are there any international agreements or a framework in place for the sharing and the distribution of these future vaccines? Will there be a mad rush from all nations, or is there an orderly distribution process to follow? There's just a number of questions here for the anticipation of a virus, a vaccine that will be developed. And if a company such as yours develops this vaccine here in Canada, is it up to the
Len, I think you cut out there. Mr. Weber?
Interpretation was temporarily suspended because the sound cut.
Okay, I don't know what happened there. I froze. I don't know why, but I'm back. Okay.
Okay, I think the actual question at the end of your preamble is missed, so please ask that. And
well, again, I don't know where I got cut off, but a company such as yours at Vito, Dr. Hodgson, hopefully soon you will develop a vaccine here in Canada. Is it up to you to determine how it gets distributed, or is it the federal government? Do they have a say on how this will be distributed out there worldwide? Maybe just some indication of how it was with your 10 vaccines that you did develop in the past.
Sorry. So thank you very much for the question. I think that's actually a very, very long and complex answer. So I think one of the things in our previous vaccines we've been developed were for animals, which is a much simpler regulatory process. The human vaccines are generally 10 years to develop. The estimates now suggest that potentially up to $1 billion. So I think first thing for clarity is we are not a company. We're part of the University of Saskatchewan, and we certainly, even with the contributions from the federal government, do not have the pocketbooks to bring us all the way up through to a full regulatory license. That being said, one of the other things that's come up is we don't know the market demand for this, but if the current population of the world, there is no single vaccine manufacturer that would be able to actually produce enough vaccine to satisfy world demand. I think what we're seeing now, even on the World Health Organization calls, is a fairly open dialogue for if there is a technology that seems to be the front runner, how knowledge translation would happen around the world. And one of the things that you've heard potentially heard Dr. Gertz say on CBC and on other news outlets is that it's a priority for us to ensure that Canada, if it's our technology, has the vaccine. And one of the ways we do that is we, again, do not have the capacity to bring us all the way through, but when we work with partners, often in our license agreements, so we never give up ownership of it. We license the technology to be able to have a company produce that. We have clauses in there to ensure that they meet milestones, that the development proceeds forward as aggressively as possible, and that there is usually a clause in there that Canada will get some sort of either preferential pricing, preferential distribution. It is always a concern of us as we try and move these technologies forward to licensed products.
Okay, thank you for that. So as I understand it, then whoever does develop a vaccine, they will certainly cater to their country first, I would think, before the international community would have access to that. It's unknown, but something to think about in the future, of course, with optimism that a vaccine will be developed. The World Health Organization, of course, has established an international expert working group on the research and development of a vaccine for COVID. And this expert working group has issued a statement. And the statement was highlighting the importance of efforts to strengthen the unprecedented worldwide collaboration, cooperation, and sharing of data already underway. We believe these efforts will help reduce inefficiencies and duplication of effort, and we will work tenaciously to increase the likelihood that one or more safe and effective vaccines will soon be available to all, unquote, from the WHO. So Dr. Fowler, in your testimony here today, you talk about, of course, it was brought up earlier today,
and Mr. Weber, please wrap it up.
Okay, about the pan-Canadian and international collaboration. you're saying that there's limited collaboration, whereas the World Health Organization says otherwise. So I'd like to know, is there collaboration out there? Is it sufficient?
I think there's a lot of collaboration around the world these days on this topic. I think we could still do better within our country at collaborating longitudinally, yes.
Thank you for that.
Thank you, Mr. Weber. We go now to Mr. Kellaway. Mr. Kellaway, 5 minutes, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and hello, colleagues, and it's great to see and hear from the witnesses today. I have two questions. The first question is for Dr. Fowler. My understanding is that you provided clinical care to patients with SARS in 2003, and I believe in 2014 you did the same with Ebola. I'd like to hear about how COVID-19, the pandemic, compares and contrasts to those outbreaks, given your experiences rather. And what are the key similarities and key challenges in the comparison?
Comparing coronaviruses, SARS 1 and 2, there are some similarities and differences. One of the differences I would say is that SARS was in large part an illness that we saw in hospital settings. And although it was in the community, to be sure, we had outbreaks within our acute care facilities, and it was a very hospital-centric problem for the most part. COVID has, of course, been through the community, and we've had very limited transmission within acute care institutions. And I think we learned a heck of a lot from our experience in SARS in Canada, particularly so in the Toronto area, and that I think is generalized across the country. Long-term care homes, however, very different story. And whereas that was not an issue back in 2003, this is one of the defining issues of this outbreak, how long-term care has been hit. Ebola, very different. And the context that I worked in Ebola treatment units with very few staff and a very different sort of clinical context. A lot of the psychological similarities, patients can get very sick, but a lot of differences in the clinical, in the clinical presentation, a very different kind of disease.
Thanks very much. I want to actually keep on a different line of questioning with you, Dr. Fowler. You talked about the Solidarity Project during this session. I'm just wondering if you can go a little deeper in terms of the research with respect to Solidarity Project. Any promising results from the treatments being used? Basically, a bit of an update on that project. And are there promising results from those treatments? If you can elaborate on that.
So the way that this trial works is that there's a continual assessment of the outcomes of the patients that have been enrolled around the world. And so we will have the ability to learn more quickly by participating than we ever would be able to do by sort of doing it alone, I would say, in Canada. We don't yet have any signal to say that we should stop any of our treatments because of efficacy or because of harm. And so we're still premature on that basis. You've seen this week, there have been a couple of announcements, one through peer-reviewed literature, one through just a press conference in the US about one medication. And I would say it's premature to be able to make any judgments about that one medication.
Okay, thanks so much. I'd like to switch my questioning to the witnesses from the University of Saskatchewan. Countries like the United States, Germany, they're exploring antibody testing for Corona-19, and we know that we hear there's pros and cons to that. While we're working on a vaccine, I'm curious as to your thoughts, your opinion, your insight. Is antibody testing something that the federal government should consider?
So you're referring to testing antibodies in people getting infected, or the role of antibodies, or are you talking about antibodies as therapeutics?
Let's go with the first two and see if we have time for the third one.
So therapeutics is certainly an approach that is very, very promising, and in fact, we're starting a study in ferrets next week to look at some prominent therapeutics there. So there is great promise for therapeutics to act similarly like antivirals. So I think there is real value in proceeding with that. I think the antibody testing in the public is really giving us some good information about the level of herd immunity out there. And so testing in that sense from a public health perspective is very important to also prepare or, have a better estimate of how the next wave of this disease might look like.
You have 30 seconds, Mr. Kellaway.
Okay.
I think Dr. Moray had wanted to speak to something you said earlier.
Very good. Okay, thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. You mentioned the SARS epidemic, and if I'm not completely mistaken, this epidemic just stopped without, much was done, and that had hundreds of deaths, not thousands or 10,000. Now, the interesting thing that happened after the epidemic was over, from a researcher standpoint, was that a lot of the funding to study this virus dried up. It's not that nothing was done, but many things came to an end. And we, the scientists, read papers from 2007 and so on in small journals that do groundwork and basic science, indicating that how many other coronaviruses out there in bats and how many other variants have been found. And I think this is the danger in funding research ad hoc and then letting it dry up. So I don't want to say that if the research on SARS would have gone fully funded for the years after that, we would not have been in this pandemic. But I think it's very dangerous to see that, okay, this pandemic stopped. We don't need to fund anything anymore. And SARS has shown that this maybe have been a mistake. With all careful consideration, I wanted to make this point because when we discussed on our board and between my colleagues, this was a point that was absolutely stressed. Thank you.
Thank you Mr.
so much.
Kellaway. Mr. Theriault, we go now to you. 2 minutes and a half, please.
Oui.
Yes, Dr. Fowler, I know that this question was asked of you, but must I understand that as of the 4 medications that were chosen in the Solidarity clinical trial, you don't want to pronounce yourself as to the efficacy of those medications at this point in the context of the clinical research that's underway? There was chloroquine, hydrochloroquine that were popular and were referred to in the media. There was the remdesivir. So can you tell us something in relation to the progress and the results that you've obtained, or do you prefer to maintain the answer that you provided earlier on?
Thank you very much for the question. I would say that we're hoping to get results that we can share as soon as possible. And it's not that I don't want to give any results, it's just that we don't have an answer yet. So it's going to take a little while longer to get a convincing answer for you. I'm sorry.
Okay.
Very good. So how can you explain what we see in the media with a huge fanfare, for instance, in the United States? There are results that are not conclusive until now. How can you explain all of that in the media? Very quickly.
Sure. One of the things that I might like to highlight is that there are a couple of places in the world, the UK, probably more than any other country right now, with this pre-existing network of clinical research ready to go, has been able to randomize about 8,000 patients into a trial that's similar to Solidarity. And I'm helping with that one, and I think that will provide answers very quickly. I'm waiting, just like you are, to see what Anthony Fauci was talking about yesterday, but so far we haven't seen any real results.
Okay, very good. Thank you. You also said, and you put that out there, and it wasn't necessarily heard, but you said that this type of pandemic should be more frequent. And so I'd like for you to explain why. I know that you have experience concerning various types of contagion and epidemics. So I'd like to hear what you have to say in that regard.
Yes, thank you. I mean, looking just back over the last not even 20 years with the examples of SARS and pandemic influenza, another coronavirus, different from SARS, different from this one, Middle Eastern respiratory syndrome, avian influenza that pops up time to time in China, and Ebola, all of those happening at a frequency that we never would have imagined 20, 50 years ago. And it's happening as we encroach upon the natural reservoirs, encroach upon sort of animal reservoirs, I think, and then we can spread things so much more quickly now because of travel, that things that would never have come away from a rural area are in a different part of the world within 24 hours.
Thank you, Mr. Theriault. We go now to Mr. Davies.
Merci.
Mr. Davies, please go ahead. 2.5 minutes.
Excellent.
Thank you. Dr. Gertz, on April 27th, an article from Maclean's quoted you as saying that the World Health Organization will try to regulate it, but we're seeing already that President Trump is not willing to listen to it. If an American company produces a vaccine, Trump will try to ensure that all of it goes to Americans regardless of what the WHO recommends. Does the WHO have any authority to manage global vaccine supplies? Are there any international safeguards in place to ensure that vaccine supplies are distributed based on need rather than national wealth or clout?
So I think what we have seen already is that certain countries will try to get access to technologies, and you probably are aware that the American president tried to get access to a vaccine out of Germany that looked technology that looks very promising. The WHO doesn't really have the authority to regulate this, and I think what we will see is now that countries, as we discussed before, will try to ensure that there is access to vaccines for their citizens.
So speaking of the WHO, they and other multiple governments have called for an international coordinating body to share access to the technology and know how to develop COVID-19 vaccines and other medical tools free of patents and with fair pricing and accessibility conditions built in to ensure that people around the world can get access to these medical technologies. If your vaccine, which is being funded by the Canadian public, is shown to work, will Vito Intervac be making the technology available to governments and manufacturers around the world to be able to quickly scale up affordable production and access to it?
Yeah, so it's very important, and as you mentioned, there is various organizations, including CEPI, an international organization, WHO. There is global access strategies that are currently being established, and as part of a publicly funded research institute, it's very important for us that we ensure, as Dr. Hodgson said before, we ensure that our vaccine is available not only to Canadians but also to other countries that are in need of it.
Thanks. And you've also said we're talking about a year before we have a vaccine ready. You said people are dying right now and the cost of the global economy is already in the trillions. We need to have vaccines ready for whatever the next pathogen might be. And this is where we have to push the envelope, end quote. Could you explain to this committee what you intended when you said push the envelope?
So there is research now that we are doing here at Vito Intervac, where the goal is to have vaccines ready for the next pathogen, the next disease, when we don't even know what that pathogen looks like. And so our goal is to develop these technologies, these vaccines that essentially would cover groups of pathogens, maybe even families of pathogens. And so you might have a vaccine that is protective against all coronaviruses, for example. And the goal would be to have such vaccines available and stockpiled sitting somewhere now. And so if we had an outbreak like we saw in Wuhan, we could then quickly utilize that vaccine. And even if it's not a perfect vaccine, contain the outbreak, the spread of the disease as much as possible. And so science, the advances in science has really made that possible now, that we can structurally look at these similarities between these viruses and identify areas on that we should focus on in terms of developing vaccine candidates.
Thank you, Mr. Davies. That brings round 2 to a close. We start round 3 with Ms. Jansen. Ms. Jansen, please go ahead, 5 minutes.
Yes, thank you very much. I'm wondering if I could talk to Dr. Fowler. So in 2003, a report was released on learning from SARS, renewal of public health. And in that report, it mentioned that it was necessary to develop a comprehensive and national public health surveillance system. that will collect, analyze, and disseminate laboratory and healthcare facility data on infectious diseases to relevant stakeholders. So now here we are in 2020, and we've heard from a number of witnesses, yourselves included today, that no such system for surveillance and data gathering exists within Canada. First of all, my first question is then, what grade would you give PHAC on pandemic preparedness?
I would want to give PHAC a very high grade based upon the resources at their disposal. So I'd put it into that context.
Okay, and so then how would you go from here and make sure that there is a reporting system that does become a reality? You mentioned numerous times about the difficulty of longitudinal information gathering.
Yeah, I think that I'm a strong supporter of strong public health and strong funding for public health. Despite working in an intensive care unit, I see the value. And so it's a simple answer, but I would say helping to fund PHAC a little bit more would be great work from the MPs and the community. I think that the sharing of information within the Canadian context through the different jurisdictions I've encountered a lot of difficulties and red tape, and so public health departments at a local level often share up to a provincial level, but those sharings don't often go to the federal level, and so some work provincially, territorially with the federal government on facilitating that, I think would go a great way to sharing.
Okay, and what is the rate of recovery for those patients that are placed on respirators?
It's an excellent question. In the early reports, it looked pretty dismal in that we saw from China and even from the United States that when people were overwhelmed, I would say, and only the sickest of patients getting onto ventilators, the recovery rate was very low. Here at my hospital, it's not anecdotal because there's actually some data, but it's a small sample size. I would say that we haven't yet lost one patient that's been put on a ventilator.
Okay.
And so that speaks, I think, to the range of possibilities when you have capacity to care for people.
Okay, then my next question is, since the majority of coronavirus deaths in Canada appear to be happening in senior care homes, should PHAC be looking at their current recommendations to ensure that they're adequately dealing with the challenges that those institutions are facing?
100%.
Okay. And considering the fact that a vaccine is not a viable short-term solution to enable Canada to get back up and running, what will we need in place in order to safely loosen restrictions for, so what measured approach, what does a measured approach look like, practically speaking, in your opinion?
Yeah, and this is speaking population-wise, not long-term care. Yeah.
Right, exactly.
I mean, conscious that I work in a critical care unit, and so that's a pretty limited scope of the population sort of health. But having some sense of this, I would say that again, a measured approach would be looking at essential services, ensuring that there's physical distancing among people possible still, and to be still considering measures like wearing of masks when people are in close confines or need to be. And a very close attention to the case counts on a daily basis. And I think we will have to pull back and forth for many cycles over the next many months.
And in regards to masks, of course, that's been a real back and forth thing. I know in the very beginning when we were at the Health Committee, we heard a lot about not wearing masks. So would you say that it's an integral part of opening restrictions is that all people are wearing masks because they do actually prevent infection?
I think that it depends upon the background sort of prevalence of the virus in the population. And when it's very, very rare, then it probably doesn't make a lot of sense by the numbers. When things are much more common, or if you're still a bit uncertain, then it probably makes some sense. And I think that change in the prevalence within the population was in part underlying the change in recommendations that came out from PHAC. We don't do it in the hospital on a daily basis, but as the prevalence changes, then we start to do it. And I think we're still in a gray area about whether it's helpful or not. But I would be cautious in moving away from the current policies.
And did you notice?
Thank you, Ms. Johnson. We go now to Dr. Pawlowski. Dr. Pawlowski, you have 5 minutes. Please go ahead.
Dr. Fowler, one quick question. You said, and did I hear this right, that of all the people that you've put on a ventilator, all of them have lived?
Well, with respect to COVID?
Yeah.
So far, but not everybody is out of the hospital yet.
Wow, that's fantastic. That's incredible, and fantastic job, Sunnybrook. I had a question about startup times that you talked about, and I want to talk a bit about the use of convalescent serum. As you probably know, this is old technology. I think there were some studies, both with H1N1 and Ebola, suggested that it might be helpful, but they weren't randomized control trials. There is some evidence, I think, or quote unquote studies from China suggesting it's effective. Again, no randomized control trials. Now, Canada has set up the Concord trial, and I think Sunnybrook is part of that trial. But I would note, I think the newspaper article yesterday noted that they drew their first batch of convalescent serum yesterday to start this up. So I would take it from that you have not yet been using convalescent serum. And I would ask, why is it taken so long? Whereas the United States, I read the other day, of 4 days ago, there was an article in a Milwaukee journal talking about 2,600 people in the United States having used convalescent serum. And at least anecdotally, it was showing pretty good results. So why is it taking us so long to get this trial up and running?
Yeah. Well, a couple of things I would say.
Pardon me, Dr. Fowler. Could you speak more carefully in your mic? Thank you.
Yeah, sorry about that. A couple of things. One, luckily, we've had many fewer infections in the country and a bit of a delay with respect to the onset of the peak. And so that pushes us out a little bit farther from the US. The other is that, people could donate plasma post-infection and it could be transfused back into potential recipients. One of the challenges in that is that despite the potentially sort of hundreds to thousands in different systems in the US where that's been done, I would say that they've learned probably very little from the experience, and they can't probably say that the treatment is better than not giving the treatment. And really, the only way to test this to know for the next 1,000 patients is to be able to compare it to standard of care in a similar group of people. So that's what that study is trying to do, and I think that's the right approach.
I want to ask a different question. This can be, I throw it to a bunch of you people, the witnesses. You're all a very highly well-educated group of people who've all been dealing with some aspect of this problem. But we are all in this together, and that we all have, maybe we don't, but most of us have kids, parents, relatives who could potentially be affected by this. So we have kind of a foot in both camps, both working with it, but also having to live a life involving the reality of COVID-19. So in light of that, both Quebec and British Columbia, I think, have announced recently their intention of reopening schools sometimes in the next couple of weeks. And I want to give you a quote, which I don't want to attribute it to anybody, but I think it kind of suggests what some people are saying. And that was saying that there was no evidence that asymptomatic children can spread the disease, and little evidence that children can spread the disease to adults. So I'd like to hear from some of the people who are witnesses as to whether you think it's time yet in the next couple of weeks to let our kids go back to school. Anyone want to start? I see Dr. Fowler shaking his head there. You want to start, Dr. Fowler?
Okay, thank you for the question. I think this is a very tough one, and I'm not expert enough to really comment. I'll just say that I worry that that large gatherings will invite transmission, and I might address one particular element, that's asymptomatic kids can't spread to adults. I would say I would not stand behind that comment. And kids are certainly more likely to be asymptomatic, less likely to have severe illness, but transmission to others, I think is still quite possible.
Dr. Moroy, Dr. Gertz, Dr. Anand, anybody else, please?
Well, thank you for this question. I think it has been a debate everywhere. I'm not a public health expert, but you're looking at Quebec. Quebec has a very heterogeneous number of infections and deaths in the regions and in Montreal. So I think it would be reasonably to think about, or even to debate, that you have some regions who could open up and other regions which should wait longer to open up. I think this is a fair consideration, to be very careful. But the difference is so big between one of the northern parts of Quebec and the island of Montreal that the people that live in this very less infected areas ask themselves, could we go back to or send our kids back to school?
Dr. Moray, your sound is not very good.
That Dr. Fowler was making, and maybe so regional specific regional openings can be made. I think it could be a consideration. In the island of Montreal, the situation is much different than in the north of Quebec. Very few cases, and in Montreal and in the care homes of Montreal, the situation is extreme, I would say. So, what the debate I was following is regionally opening, yes, but not generally opening.
Thank you, Dr. Pawlowski. I will have to put an end to it there. We go now to back to Dr. Kitchen. Dr. Kitchen, please go ahead. You have 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you for that. Dr. Fowler, I just want to follow up just on the line of questioning that I was leading on to, and Dr. Jacek actually brought up the one I want to talk about other drugs, but interested to know, have you seen or experienced or heard on issues of lung issues, in particular damage to the alveoli in high caliber athletes? Are they being, so a high end athlete that is completely physically fit and doing high performance, are they at any greater risk to their lung mechanism?
Thank you. I'm not sure that I could comment that they're at higher risk, but the notion that it is only the elderly or only those that have comorbidities that are getting ill, I would say that that might be the average, yes, but I've certainly seen lots of younger people and some very young people that were previously healthy that have developed severe disease. That's not the most common presentation at all, the most common risk group, but there are definitely so-called host factors. So in ourselves that might predispose beyond the typical risk factors.
And my concern really would be more along the lines of hemorrhagic collapse and expiring from that.
Yeah, that's a good question. Although we have seen clotting in the blood vessels, we've not seen clinically a lot of hemorrhage that we can see in other conditions, but that's not been a prominent feature.
Great, thank you very much. Dr. Moray, and thank you for your presentation. You talked about a positive, which is the fact that there's collaboration between researchers and scientists, and that's great to see that we're seeing that across the country. But one of the negatives you talked about was the CIHR canceling the spring science competition. I'm wondering if you could comment on how you see that may be affecting the basic sciences, and in particular, how it might deal with the viral, have an impact on viral research.
Yeah, thank you for the question. When we heard there's cancellation of the CHR spring competition, we were very surprised and now worried because the way it works in fundamental research, the institutions and all this, also the CFI makes a lot of investment in new researchers. They set up the labs, they provide startup funding for several years, and there's a lot of thing going on before this researcher is ready to submit his or her first request for funding. And then when they are ready and submitted and everything is done, and then they are stopped cold like that, that's creating a lot of frustration.
Dr. Moray,
that's creating a lot of frustration when they're stopped after all these investments by the institutions have been done. So that's one element. The second element is that we feel that health research should not be at the expense of COVID research. I think the response was good, and I don't want to take anything back of that, but if we are seeing the monies that are flowing into COVID-19 research being subtracted in future competitions, that would compromise what we have in health research.
Thank you very much.
Dr. Kitchen, let me just pause your time for a moment here. I believe Mr. Theriault has his hand up. Did you have a problem, Mr. Theriault?
Oui, je m'excuse.
Yes, I'm sorry to interrupt, Mr. Speaker. I would like to tell interpreters that they have to put their phones away from their interpretation console, because we are experiencing the same problems as we had at the beginning and during the sound test. So I apologize to everyone.
Mr. Kitchen, please go ahead.
Dr. Anand, in the press release that put out by Genome Canada following the announcement of further funding for COVID-19 research, you stated the following: of critical importance, CanCogen will establish and manage a framework for cross-Canada safe data sharing, coordination, and analysis. Data will be shared with national and international collaborators to enable additional research, including Canadian vaccine development efforts. This will ultimately help respond to the current COVID-19 emergency, as well as build capacity to respond and manage future outbreaks of this virus and other pandemics. I'm wondering, are you aware, was there any national framework for information sharing in place during the outbreaks of SARS or N1H1 or Ebola?
Thank you so much for the question. And again, here I'm going to pass to Dr. Bell, my colleague, who's going to be more familiar with those types of questions, especially with regards to SARS.
I think the model for sharing in these types of epidemics is that the data that is available that can go into public databases that is accessible for use by public health and by researchers. It's certainly been the case. There's a flu, constantly one that is available for informing flu. And so whether it was available at the time of SARS or not, I'm not sure, but it's certainly the mechanism that we are going to be using for the current work that we're doing on the COVID.
How long afterwards would you expect as a national framework?
Dr. Kitchen, we're going to have to suspend for a brief moment. We're having trouble with the French translation. They have to reboot the PCs to resolve the issue. So we'll just suspend for a couple of minutes. I'll give you a couple of minutes after we get back and to carry on. And so the meeting is now suspended briefly. So the meeting is now resumed.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I appreciate that. I was asked a question by a reporter about your puzzle. So yes, do keep us informed about that. Very quickly, then, I'm taking that we're hearing that we don't really know whether there was a framework or not. And I guess, how long would it take for a framework to be created? And do you think it would be best to establish a national framework for data sharing in place? If we'd had that in place in December, that would have changed the situation for vaccine researchers?
So I'm not aware of, and can't answer the question about the data that was necessarily needed, all of the data that's needed for the vaccine research development, and maybe our VITO colleagues could address that. I would say that the PHAC and the provincial health labs have been working together for a number of years and have created frameworks in which they make the data available and not only globally, but with across each other, and they share it on a very rapid basis. And some of that obviously is important for the vaccine development. Certainly genomics data has a long history of being made available publicly as quickly as possible. And for instance, when the SARS sequence was done at the Genome Sciences Center in Vancouver, it was immediately released into the public. And that is the model that is also proposed for our project, in which we are sequencing the viral genomes from up to 150,000 individuals infected in Canada. That will go as rapidly as possible into the public domain and certainly will be available for use by vaccine researchers.
Thank you. Do I have any more time, Mr. Chair?
10 seconds.
I will defer that to your puzzle.
Great. Thank you very much. We go now to Ms. Sidhu. Ms. Sidhu, please go ahead. 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you all the witnesses to be with us, and thank you for your contributions. My first question is for Dr. Walker. I recently had a discussion with the Dynacare, a healthcare solution company. Once there's a vaccine ready to be distributed, I just want to ask that you can, even though Dr. Robert Fowler, you can join in the answer to what role do underlying health condition and demographic factor play in the severity of COVID-19? How will this play in the effectiveness of a vaccine? So demographically, who will be get a first access?
So I think, again, that's a lot of questions that need to be addressed. Obviously, we want to make sure that the vaccine is available to the people that need it the most. But as you alluded to in your question, I think it's very important that we make sure that the clinicians are involved in this, and any underlying conditions that may affect the outcome of vaccination need to be addressed by the physician who is seeing the patients.
And Dr. Fowler, you can answer the second part. I have seen severe impacts on individual families in the community as we battle COVID-19. I'm especially concerned about the vulnerable population. Diabetes, you can say, one of them. So what role do underlying health condition, demographic factors play in the severity of COVID-19?
Yeah, I would say sometimes we take a more measured response in that kind of a question, but there does seem to be some very clear signals with respect to age and comorbid conditions. The common ones, hypertension, diabetes, maybe COPD, etc. But I think we've clearly seen that play out clinically, where the vast majority of deaths have been related to illness in older people, and particularly those that have risk factors beyond themselves, but because of where they live. And so I would think that we would be looking very strongly not just at individual patient medical risk factors, but living and social conditions and long-term care would play prominently in that.
And can you clear that when you said recovery rate, sometimes it's low when they go on a ventilator? So is there special population, or is any particular demographics?
Well, I think like many illnesses, the more comorbid conditions that you have, and the worse your state of health might be before you get very sick with this, the worse you will probably fare in getting COVID. But to clarify the earlier statement, in some of the reports, specifically from China and Wuhan specifically, where I think they were clinically very overwhelmed, and I think the results that they had with patients getting off of a ventilator there are probably not going to be so generalizable to what we see in other healthcare systems that have been able to sort of keep up with that demand, such as our own.
And yesterday, I spoke with an exceptional local company, Medtronic, in my riding, Brampton South. This is one of many companies leading the way when it comes to global research. They recently announced that they were releasing their ventilator design to the public to speed up research and production. I know my colleague said that question before, but my question is for whoever can answer. What other examples of international and Canadian collaboration can you list, and how can we speed up global research cooperation? I know funding is one, but other, if you can elaborate.
I think on the clinical research side, I mean, I'm a bit biased because it's a lot of what I do every day, but there is, I would say, tremendous global collaboration on clinical research right now. And I think really people have realized that in order to get answers most quickly, we're going to need to collaborate across the world on trying to figure out what treatments work and don't work.
And certainly, I'll say from Genome Canada's perspective that we, the researchers themselves at an individual level are used to collaborating internationally. What we're seeing now is a more systematic approach to this, and we're having a lot of international tools. So, for instance, there's something called the Global Alliance for Genomics and Health, which serves to set standards and help share best practices. Its secretariat, I think, is actually based here in Canada, but is operating internationally. They're doing a lot of coordination work to support that on-the-ground collaboration. And then we've had a number of companies, data companies in particular, but also other biotech companies reaching out to us just to offer to help, right? And not to not for their own personal sort of intellectual property development and so on, but to offer their services. So I think we're certainly seeing a motivation like we haven't seen before. No doubt.
Thank you, Mr. Du. We go now to Mr. Shampoo. Mr. Shampoo, please go ahead. 2 minutes and a half. Thank you.
Merci, Monsieur le Président.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Thank you to the witnesses for being here today and for sharing your knowledge. It is much appreciated and very informative. My question will be on the data that will be important going forward. Immunization that we develop after contracting COVID-19 and recovering from it. There are about 1 million people around the world that had COVID-19 and recovered. I don't think that any of these people contracted COVID-19 a second time. And so my question is for Dr. Hodson and Dr. Gertz. How much time must we wait before we have an idea of the immunization that we can develop after recovering from the virus? And as a follow-up question, are there more concrete tests that could be made with recovered patients in order to verify this more rapidly? For example, could we put them in an high-risk environment? Could we, for example, test them in the lab by exposing them to the virus?
Already, we do. There is work studies going on with individuals that have had an infection and recovered from the infection. What we're learning from them is how long immunity lasts, what effector mechanisms play a role in protection, how that can be built into the vaccine research we're doing. In terms of how long one would have to wait, I mean, you essentially develop a very strong immune response after infection. Typically, within a few weeks, you have a good adaptive immune response, and that typically lasts months and hopefully longer. And that's the question that we don't know at the moment. Certainly, it would be great to study some of this. I think ethically, you might. That will have to be specifically addressed, whether you can expose these individuals to the virus, or put them in higher risk situations. But certainly those things are very important. We can learn a lot from people that have recovered from this infection.
I can maybe add to this, since you mentioned my name, to that. I think the efforts that are ongoing in the research community is to build biobanks of patient samples, serum, to test the serum of antibodies, whether these antibodies are neutralizing antibodies. You require these. And for this, many research institutions are building up infrastructure to test and to come to a conclusion when these neutralizing antibodies appear and whether they can be used. So there is still upstream research to be done, not certain that you can just take plasma from anyone who had the disease and use it as a therapeutic. There is some research going on before you can do this.
Thank you, Mr. Shampoo. We go now to Mr. Davies. Mr. Davies, 2.5 minutes, please.
Thank you, Dr. Hodgson. In a recent article, you noted that Canada's capacity to manufacture a vaccine domestically is concerning. You were quoted as saying, from a national security or emergency preparedness perspective, the manufacturing capacity we have has really started to go down, end quote. Should the federal government take steps to expand Canada's vaccine manufacturing capacity? And if so, do you have any specific recommendations in that regard?
So I should qualify that Canada has some fantastic vaccine manufacturers, but a lot of these facilities are built for specific vaccines. So basically, Sanofi Pasteur's almost largest investment ever was to enhance the facility in downtown Toronto, but in Toronto, but that's for a specific vaccine. So I think you've actually already seen the federal government do that, where they awarded us $12 million to increase our vaccine manufacturing in the level 3 facility as well as NRC. And I think the side effect of this is companies have actually looked at this again, and they're going to bring up their own capacity. But for sure, there's 2 sites already from the government announcements, our own and NRC's, that are now going to be GMP production facilities for emergency. I'm assuming emergency response. That's one of the key ones for our facility.
Well, Dr. Hodgson, this article was from April 25th, 5 days ago. What were you thinking about when you were expressing your concern?
Oh, I've been working on vaccine manufacturing capacity in Intervac for over a decade, and the federal government actually had already put an initial amount of money in to help build this in 2018. So but it's a general consensus from emergency preparedness. It's not a hard calculation. If we have 35 million people and we need a rapid response vaccine, what capacity do we need in Canada, assuming the borders shut down because of whatever reason and we're not able to get it? And I think you've seen a response to that. And one of the questions we got asked a lot before the money was awarded is, if we fund this, how many vaccines can you produce? Okay. That's a very tough question, because efficiency of production changes for every vaccine.
Thanks. And finally to you, Dr. Fowler, recently Canada's First Minister has released a joint statement identifying the criteria that need to be in place in order to begin to take steps to reopen the economy, including ensuring that expanded healthcare capacity exists to support all needs, including COVID-19 patients and non-COVID-19 patients. From your experience, do we currently have sufficient capacity to support the needs of all patients? And if not, how long do you think it'll take to develop that capacity?
Well, I mean, we usually run our hospital over 100% occupied, and the ICU similarly. So on a good day, I would say I worry about capacity. Right now, we're looking in hospitals to, again, slowly ramp up on procedures that we think we can do safely and not stress the system. And so it's a bit of a wishy-washy answer, but I'd say it's a very delicate balance right now. And I think we have to be very careful over the next couple of weeks.
Thank you, Mr. Davies. So that wraps up round 3. I'd like to thank all of our great witnesses for the information and sharing their expertise with us and so much of your time. And I certainly wish you well as you proceed along this very important trajectory that you're on, this quest for solutions. And And with that, I'd also like to thank the interpretation and the staff for all their efforts today. And to the members, thank you very much for your time, and look forward to the next meeting, which will be Tuesday, I believe. Thank you.
Merci à tous.
Meeting adjourned.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.